Welcome back. Let's talk about Pascal's Pensées. Now, this book was a powerful one in my own thinking and my own journey. And Pascal was known as a mathematician. There's a programming language named after Blaise Pascal. He was also a deep theological thinker and philosophical thinker. And it is not an easy read to go through the Pensées, but it is powerful. It is a compelling read, and I apologize. I know different people pronounce the book differently. That's the best that I've heard in terms of its French pronunciation, but I don't know French. So my apologies for that, but it doesn't mean that I haven't read the book thoroughly and carefully, repeatedly, and have some good insights for you. Pascal was a brilliant mind, and he has some ideas and insights that can help us think more clearly, be better problem solvers, be better truth seekers, be better treasure seekers, both literal and metaphorical. So I'm going to walk you through 5 lessons from Pascal that have really stuck with me over the years. The first one is this. I have and they're each based upon a different quote that I've jotted down from this book. The first one is, "The heart has its reasons, which reason knows nothing of." And I've read through that one, and I went back and I looked at the book again to make sure I kind of understood the context and where he was going with it. But the way that I'm going to introduce it here is that oftentimes there is something that we kind of sense to be true, but our reason hasn't really caught up with it. And some people might call that a kind of intuition or something like that. And it can actually lead us astray. Our intuition can lead us in a lot of negative directions. But I've also learned that it's very, very wise to pay attention to it, because sometimes, especially as you've trained yourself to think about a particular topic or an idea, you've developed some what are called heuristics or kind of habits or methods of problem solving that are sort of shortcuts. And sometimes those can be cognitive biases and logical fallacies. But oftentimes, as you get more mature and you get a little bit older and you have some more life experience, you can kind of notice when something's a little bit off, or when there's something a little bit different, even before your observation skills have kicked in and you notice it. So what I would say is, don't just trust these things blindly, but respect them enough to pause and look twice and to think about it a little bit more, give it a little more attention, jot it down, revisit it regularly, because you may find later that you understand it. And I've actually, at this stage of my life, I'm in my 50s, I find this happening more and more, that if I ignore this kind of gut instinct, it usually doesn't turn out that great. That later on I realize what I was feeling and why. Because it was kind of my instinct from my prior knowledge and experience that my reason and my conscious reason hadn't caught up with, but it was there. And so that's an important thing to note. It's almost like a rational equivalent of your moral conscience, if that makes sense. So you kind of train yourself to think in a certain way, and then you notice things based upon that training, even though you've forgotten the actual specific rules of the training, if that makes any sense. Okay, the second thing is a great quote, says, "Man's greatness lies in knowing he is wretched." Now, there's a theological component to this for Pascal, but I'm going to talk about it just in terms of humility in our thinking. There's a phrase among some people where they talk about epistemological humility. In other words, about being a little bit humble about our truth claims and what we claim to fully understand, and approach things with a recognition that we can learn more and that we have some flaws and some tendencies to make mistakes. That's why I have a whole bunch of videos on logical fallacies and cognitive biases, because those are the kinds of mistakes that we sometimes make that prevent us from thinking clearly and solving problems as effectively as we could, and seeing things that we might miss otherwise. So an acknowledgement of our wretchedness, of the flawed part of us. And I'm not talking about this like sort of self flogging, beating yourself up in some kind of way, but it is an acknowledgement that I have weaknesses, I have flaws, I make mistakes, and I don't always do the right thing, right? And so acknowledging that in the world of thinking and clear thinking. The third one is, all of humanity's problems stem from man's inability to sit quietly in a room alone. Now, whether you universally agree with that phrase, that all of humanity's problems stem from man's inability to sit quietly in a room alone, the idea is that Pascal is arguing for the importance of pausing, not being overly distracted, not having to have like constant information and constant stimulation, sitting with ideas. The concept of meditation in the classic sort of Western sense was once introduced to me as almost like a cow that's chewing its cud, and it's chewing and then it swallows and the cow regurgitates it and chews on it a little bit more. I know not the most pleasant thinking in the world, but you're kind of chewing on the same idea over and over and over again, and that helps you to intellectually digest it and gain deeper understanding of it and get the most nutrients out of what you're thinking about. It requires that kind of sitting with things and being silent with it and pondering it a little bit. Then the fourth quote is, "It is not certain that everything is uncertain." And even amid doubt, some truths remain constant. So sometimes we can get to this place where we're trying to be so humble that we just say, nothing's certain. I don't know anything. And well, that's not going to help you either, because there are some things that are certain and there are some things that you can know. And there are some basic rules and things like that. So it's important to acknowledge the things that you can know and that you do know, and use those as a kind of building blocks to the things that are more ambiguous and less certain. And that can be very, very useful in our thinking, our treasure hunting, our truth seeking, all of those things. And then the final one. The final one is actually comes out of one of the more famous theological arguments of Pascal. It's called Pascal's wager. And he says, "Wager then without hesitation that he exists." Now, here's where this comes from. I'm going to describe it, the theological argument, so that you understand the thinking. And then I'm going to take it and I'm going to apply it to just a non-theological situation, just about how to think more clearly. Okay? So Pascal made this argument where he said, suppose God actually exists, and God has revealed his teaching and his plans for you in this book called the Bible. If you believe, you believe God exists, so say he really exists, and say you believe he exists and you follow what he says. Well, that's a good thing. If he does exist, but you don't believe it and you don't follow, that's a bad thing. And then he says, if God doesn't exist, but you believe he does and you follow these things, your life may actually be pretty good anyway, because there's some pretty good moral teaching and guidance and virtues and other things like that to pay attention to. And if you don't believe and he doesn't exist, well, there's not a loss there. So he creates these kind of four scenarios. Either God exists and you believe, God exists, you don't believe, God doesn't exist and you believe, God doesn't exist and you don't believe. And he says that looking at those four options logically, it's logically wiser to believe. That's what he argues. Now, whether you want to agree with that or not, that's his wager. And yet what I'd say is that when it comes to just thinking, there's a lot in our life that we cannot be certain about. If you are saying, I want 100% absolute certainty for this before I try it, before I test it, before I go out and take any risks with it, then there's a lot that you're going to be missing. There are going to be a lot of opportunities that will be missed. In fact, if you were on a literal treasure hunt and you never went out and looked for a treasure until you were 100% certain that you knew exactly where it was, you would never go out of your house and you would never go out and search. So instead, think in terms of this wager way of thinking. Think in terms of probabilities and these scenarios. And you can go through, sort of create a 4 quadrants and think about the different scenarios and possibilities. And that will help guide you toward wise decision-making and wise choices and what you're going to kind of lean into. So there you have it. There are the 5 lessons that really stuck with me from Pascal, specifically from his Pensées, and I have read some of his other writings, but all of these ideas come specifically from that one book or collection of writings. Hope you find this useful, and I look forward to your comments.